Hey gamers, welcome to the channel. In this sprint's devlog, we're going to be adding menus and a new hub area to my indie game, Sorcerer Shootout. If you're new here and you don't know what Sorcerer Shootout is, it's essentially a roguelite wave shooter where you play as a mage and destroy enemies with various different spells. But without any further ado, let's take a look at what I did this week. Hey, Future Dakota here. I just wanted to give a huge thank you to all of you. The Devlog 0 of this series actually became my #1 most performing video compared to my last 10 videos, so I just wanted to give you a huge thanks for that. But yeah, back to the video. The sprints I have planned are meant to be 2 weeks long. However, I wasn't able to start until November 11th this time. This means I only have a week and a half to complete everything in this sprint. So on day 1, all I did was set up the Trello board for the project and plan everything that I needed to do for the sprint. It seems pretty unsubstantial, but it really is going to make a big difference for what I'm developing, so I know what I need to do. On day 2, I started making a better UI for the game. For my first attempt, I tried making a universal UI which would display the player's health, when the secondary spell was off cooldown, and which spells they had equipped. In the end though, I felt like this was just way much to put above the player. Instead, I implemented this. It's basically just a health bar and the player indicator above the player. I feel the need to add the player indicators because players will have the ability to change their skins, so knowing who's who is a must. On day 3, I started trying to finish the UI for the game. I needed a way to show the player when they could cast their secondary spell again. I thought adding it to the cursor would be the best option. I added a ring around the cursor that would only display when the player's secondary spell off cooldown, otherwise the opacity is going to be 0. I think I'll add some particles and a sound effect to this later, but right now I think it works fine. Sorcerer Shootout can also be played with controller however, so I had to implement this for a controller as well. Instead of displaying the mana circle and the cursor at the mouse, I drew it at a set distance away from the player depending on where the player's controller was aiming. After that was established, I tried to make a way to show the player which spell they'd pick up from the spell tones. I was originally going to use icons, but A, they just didn't look right, and B, the player's UIs blocked them. So I had to make the player's UI smaller by removing this arrow, and I think this changes for the best. However, the icons still didn't look right to me, so instead I decided to use the same style I did in the original, where the tome itself would display the particles relating to the spell that it would give the player. I made particles for the Fireball and Poison Cloud spells, but I didn't bother for Hold Monster or the Poison Ray because I knew I was going to change them later. I also wanted to implement a Game Boy Color inspired cutscene to explain the story of the game and some other cutscenes when the player defeated bosses. These will be more like a series of illustrations that are shown to the player with text and a voiceover. To start out on this, I created some Game Boy inspired pieces and called it a night. Day 4 mostly consisted of me struggling to make a menu. The first thing I needed to do was make a logo. I used the original and cleaned it up for the new version. I also created sprites for play and options buttons. I threw these all into a scene and got the functionality of the play button working. This was the easy part. What came next was 4 hours of me trying to get a menu and setting system working. You see, me and menus have a love-hate relationship. I love menus and I would love to design them all day every day if I didn't have to actually implement them. Implementing UI and menus are an absolute pain in GameMaker Studio 2, which is my game engine of choice. I'll spare you the details of my struggle trying to make this menu, mostly because I don't want to relive it, but this is what the finished menu ended up being. It even works with controller. Day 5 was just a lot of tweaks to the menu to fix bugs, make it smoother and more responsive. Not a whole lot to show. On day 6 I didn't really have a lot of time to work, so I decided that I'd do some polish instead of doing one of my main tasks. I decided that the main thing I wanted to do today was make improvements to the Hold Monster spell that I'd been wanting to do for a while. I wanted it to have more of the flavor of freezing a monster in place instead of it just holding it, because I feel like more people will just be able to instantly recognize what the spell does. I also wanted to reduce the cooldown and increase the projectile speed. This is what it looks like in game with all these changes. I also created a new particle for its scroll and dialed back the particles on all the other tomes so they weren't so extreme. After that was done, I realized a few things that I hadn't thought about. A. hold monster doesn't stop necromancers from spawning skeletons if they already started, like killing them does, and B, mushrooms will multiply indefinitely even after the wave is over. I made it so that necromancers stop summoning once they're frozen, and mushrooms no longer spawn more of themselves if the wave is over. On day 7 I didn't have a lot of time to work because I had a lot of schoolwork to do, so I wanted to do something simple. Splash screens in most games are just there to display the company name and logo. However, in my games they serve another purpose as well. In every one of my games I have an object called the core, which stays persistent no matter what room the player is in. Since it stays persistent, it has to be instantiated in a room that will never be gone back to, or else there will be another one created. The splash screen only appears at the very beginning of the game, so this makes it a perfect opportunity to make the core object. To create my splash screen, I just made 3 simple animations and threw them into the game. At the beginning of the game, the splash screen chooses a random one of these animations to play. Day 8 was when I actually started working on the hub. The first thing I did was make a new sprite for the teleporters in the game. Before I had this obelisk, but I really wanted something that A, fit more with the game, and B, could be walked on top of and didn't impede gameplay. I'm pretty happy with the sprite, but I'm not 100% solid on how the sprite fills up to show the player when the next wave will be activated. I might have to play around with it or maybe even remove it entirely. After the new sprite was implemented into the game, I made 3 teleporters in the hub. The 2 on the sides don't do anything just yet, but the one in the middle takes you to the game. I also made better screen transitions, which you've probably noticed. I also wanted to talk a little bit about the cutscenes that I said I was going to implement. I figured they wouldn't really fit into the game, so I scrapped that idea. I already paid for the voice acting, so I'm not quite sure what I'll do with it. Maybe I'll use it in the game some other way, maybe I won't, but I'm pretty sure I can use it in the trailer. I took off on day 9 because I was really tired, but on day 10 I set up the skin changing system. Basically, right now, if the player walks up to the skin changer, they can use left or right to select the skin that they want, and then use in the interact key to equip it. It kind of feels bad to use right now because you can walk up to it and then you can't really walk away. You have to use up or down to move away from it. But for right now, this is how I'm going to keep it, but I'll figure out a new way to do it in the future. On day 11, I finished up the hub area by creating the shop. I made a little shopkeeper guy who displays your currency above his head, and there's 2 spells that you can buy on either side of him. One is a secondary and the other is a primary. These spells display their price above themselves. After this, I made the hub area smaller, as the white expanse with very few things to do made it look very empty. But that was basically everything that I did this week on the game. Like I said, I had less time than normal to work on the game this week, so a lot of things that I implemented are lacking polish, but I'll hopefully have plenty of time to polish the stuff in the future. If you want access to the roadmap and Trello board of this project, then make sure to join my mailing list. I send out an email every week to let you know what I do each week. If you want to talk to me and some other cool game developers, artists, and just generally cool people, then join my Discord. And if you want to support me financially, then consider turning off your ad blocker when watching my videos. Also, it'd mean a lot to me if you left a comment on this video. They're definitely my favorite part of YouTube. But that'll about do it for this video. Bye!